Hello and welcome to Drive-In Double Feature Podcast. I'm Nathan.
I'm Ryan.
This is the podcast where we talk about two movies a week every Tuesday and Thursday. But before we get into today's movie, you should check out our Patreon. Just for $5 a month, you can help support us, and you get fun bonus episodes like us ranking movies, us just talking about movies, a little less structured, but it is a good time, and you help support us. But no main content is locked behind there. But today, we are talking about Cruising from 1980, starring Al Pacino and directed by the late William Friedkin, who was an excellent director. One of those directors that just kind of has, later on in his career, he had less hits, but he definitely has some huge movies from The Exorcist, The French Connection, which won Best Picture, and Cruising, which has kind of risen up in popularity since its release. I don't know. Do you enjoy some Friedkin?
Oh yeah. I mean, definitely one of the greats. I mean, just what I really love about a guy like this is he still took risks.
Mhm.
He made a lot of really risky pictures. He made a lot of pictures that's like that would end like a lot of people's careers, or like, oh no, that's not the safe pick. But he does something like French Connection or The Exorcist, and he wins all this acclaim, wins Best Picture for
Mhm.
French Connection. And then he makes a movie like Cruising. It's just like it's like total like could have definitely he could have easily have just played it safe and nobody would have batted an eye. He's like, no, I want to do this. It sounds fun or
Yeah,
challenging.
it was something that interested him, and it's like it seemed like he was always doing that. I mean, even late in his career, one of his last movies was Killer Joe, which was a hard X-rated movie. He was always trying something different, and you know what? He didn't take shit from no one. Have you ever listened to him in interviews and stuff? He just doesn't care. He never loved being praised. Like if somebody was like, "Oh, I love your movies," he'd be like, "Shut up!" Like he hated it, but he was always interesting to listen to. And I listened to some of the commentary for this movie, and man, it's so full of information.
Oh yeah, I listened probably about half of the movie. I listened to commentary, so
Hmm.
um, it was a wealth. I mean, he knew exactly what he was doing, like what he had planned. It was just like it was
Hmm.
so well thought out that he seemed to be doing. It just seemed like it was all really carefully planned.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But let's go ahead and get into kind of the plot of this movie. If you don't already know, Cruising is the story of a cop played by Al Pacino, who there is a series of killings within the gay community. So Al Pacino kind of has to go into this underground gay S&M culture, and he has to find out who the killer is. And he goes crazy undercover, kind of forgets who he is along the way. And this movie does not hold back. It's so wild watching this movie from 1980, and it still pushes boundaries. It's a filthy movie, so I'll put a little bit of a warning on this one for y'all.
Oh yeah, like even watching it today, and they mentioned. I mean, it's not as like you don't see a whole lot like in terms of like stuff going on, but there's a
Mhm.
lot of implications and implied scenes like going on that's just
Yeah.
like what's actually happening.
Oh
Like
yeah, you know what's going on. And it's just kind of crazy all the stuff that goes on in the background. Like this movie is that like classic 80s dirty New York. It's really like kind of gross setting, destroyed areas. But when you get into these gay bars, it is just, I guess, come to find out through the commentary, all the background actors were people that were a part of the leather scene, as they called it. And it's just like just full of people making out, sexual acts just in the background, and Al Pacino just kind of hanging out, taking it all in, kind of learning about all of this.
yeah, Al Pacino kind of plays an outsider because he's trying, like you said, he's trying to infiltrate this community, and
Mhm.
it's I like a lot of the earlier scenes because he goes in there clearly not knowing what he's doing, and,
Yeah.
he has to figure out and like by making some mistakes, but eventually, he gets really embedded into that community, and starts to consume him.
Yeah, see, that's one thing about this movie. The first time I watched this, because I've seen this before, I think I was a little put off by Pacino's performance the first time. It's a very quiet performance. It's a little more introspective, which I don't think I'm used to with Pacino. With Pacino, I'm used to big performances where he's really exploding. Here, he kind of takes a different turn, and I think this time watching it, I liked it a lot more.
That was my exact reaction because
Mhm.
I this is my second time seeing this movie, and when I watched it the first time, I was like, huh, that was a little odd. Like I just it's very subdued role by Al Pacino. Like he does
Yeah,
have a wild moment every a
he's
couple
got
of
it.
wild moments because it's Al Pacino, and I think even William Friedkin said like, yeah, I let Al do his thing like for this scene right here because there's a scene where he like beats up somebody
Hmm.
and that's where he kind of lets loose. But and this one they kind of explained that role a little more, like in William Friedkin explained it a lot more, which made a lot more sense, which made me appreciate the role a lot more. Is when he was saying that Al Pacino, like he was kind of going in, like because William Friedkin was saying, like he was going into, like he would go and like to all these bars himself and see what was actually happening in these bars,
Hmm.
and so that way he can know like how to write the movie because he also wrote the screenplay too. So
Hmm.
when Al Pacino, like when they're like, okay, we're gonna shoot this scene, Al, and then when Al sees this like insanity going on, like Al Pacino almost looks like afraid, like when he was going like in there, and he said he was actually used that fear for the movie because it's almost like there's like an innocent kind of quality to him, like whoa, I wasn't expecting this, like what's all this stuff, and then but like as I said, as the movie goes along he starts losing that and he starts knowing how a lot of those people move and act in those movies.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's really interesting. And they talk about this. Did you watch any of the special features?
I did.
Um,
I watched all of them.
yeah, which these are actually available on YouTube. When I watched these, I realized that I had already watched these before. But I do really like how they explain, like, it was right out of like the 70s. People were really into like, you got to learn your role, you got to figure it out. So they really were getting into the community and trying to figure things out. Somebody who's away from the community, but I still think does a great performance is Paul Sorvino in this movie, who plays the chief, which is another really subdued like performance. But he like has like this pain in his eyes, and he's so quiet the whole time. There's something about his performance I really like. It's something hidden behind him.
Yeah, I because Paul Sorvino, I mean, mainly I kind of think of him as like being in mob
The
movies, or
same here. Or
he's
Rico
always
the
like,
Genetic Opera, of course.
well, I'll take your word for it. But I always he's always like angry mobster type of guy, or like someone that's really threatening or cold. But like you said, he acts like a guy that's just been through a lot, and he's just
Hmm.
like he's done. He's seen a bunch of stuff that he doesn't want to see, and it always acts really just kind of like apathetic, kind of where he's just like, I hate that I even have to deal with this stuff anymore. And
Yeah.
um, even like in the movie, there are a couple of gay informants,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and they get kind of hassled by these other two cops in the beginning of the movie, which one is played by Mike Starr. Like I've seen him in a bunch of movies, and
Hmm.
the other guy, I can't think of the actor's name, but he played Garza in Rocky.
Yeah. God, I always forget his name, but he's like in so many movies that we watch. Honestly.
Okay, so the actor's name was Joe Spinell,
Yeah.
and like I said, he played Gazzo in Rocky. He's also in Taxi Driver. He's in The Godfather. I mean, he's in a bunch of really popular movies. So,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, he's in that very beginning where he's kind of hassling these gay informants. But anyway, the one informant goes up to Paul Sorvino's character. It's like, hey, I need you to help me out, and Paul Sorvino's like, I don't even want to deal with this crap. Like, like He's just like, I just want to be done with this whole ordeal.
Yeah, exactly. And I like that a lot. This movie gives me, when I first started it, as it went on, less and less, especially with how procedural this movie is. It reminded me a little bit of a Giallo, like an Italian movie, like a little inspiration there from the beginning. It doesn't quite go to the lengths that it does. It's actually something that I think might put some people off. This movie doesn't really have any like huge twists. There's no like big setup or anything. Like I said, it feels like a police procedural. Like this is actually how being an undercover cop would end up going in this situation. So it ends up feeling a little deadpan. Not a huge. There's no huge climax to it all.
No, there's not. I mean, they do have somebody in mind who they think is the killer that's been
Mm,
slaying all these other gay people. And it's actually really clever how they filmed a lot of these murder scenes because they didn't want you to know right away who the killer was in the movie. So the very first kill in the movie, which is also like pretty graphic, like it has like a man that's naked and tied up and gets stabbed to death, and they have the scene where the victim that dies in that scene, he's killed by another actor, and then the guy playing the killer ends up being the victim in the second murder,
yep.
and then so on and so forth. Like it's just like all these different people are playing the killer because they don't want you to know right away by their body type, because they want it to be kind of like this faceless killer.
Yeah, and I think they do a good job of that and setting all of that up.
I was also going to say too, another thing that's I really liked about this movie, where I didn't notice it until, well, I kind of noticed it at the beginning, but then when I was watching the behind the scenes, they pointed it out. But like, there's the scene in the very first time that Al Pacino goes into a bar, and
Hmm.
then he's kind of in this corner, and there's like a scene where it's like everybody, like all these faces like pass by him and walk by, and it's like people that are going to be playing an impact later in the movie.
I noticed that too, or at least I thought about it after when I was watching the special features, looking at the scenes. Like, oh, that's actually a really clever way to set up like the future of this movie, because that even plays whenever we figure out who it actually is. It shows that person's face. It's like, oh yeah, I remember him from earlier. So I think it does a really good job of setting all of that up, and it goes for the classic schizophrenic is the killer at the end of it all, right? Um,
Yeah,
yeah, because he what it is it's a gay man, I'm gonna say that he's probably repressed. That's kind of the whole thing, and then he sees his father, and his father is disappointed at him. So he's like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna kill people just to kind of make things better." But I do really like the scene where he does actually talk to his father on the bench, because it does. I remember the first time I watched it, it felt odd, but I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And this time you really can tell that it really is just a fake setting, because it's way too brightly lit. It's
mm-hmm.
really kind of awkward, but it makes sense because it's all within this guy's mind.
Well, yeah, because the killer too, like I said, the face is a little different, but the thing that is connecting is that the killer has the same voice.
Hmm.
It's like it's always this really specific voice
Yes,
that the
yeah.
killer has,
It's kind of
and
like a duck voice.
I wish that would have taken this movie to a different level. Then that would have been like, this is definitely Giallo.
Oh, this is
But
perfect.
well, if Lucio Fulci was directing it, you definitely know there would be a duck somewhere in this movie.
Yeah, definitely.
But the killer has a specific voice, and when the guy's having a talk conversation with his dad also has that same voice. So it's like when
Mhm.
he's doing these killings, he's imitating his dad.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think that's a really cool touch. But there's a really cool scene that happens where Al Pacino breaks into the bad, the murderer's place, and it's in broad daylight, and he has to remove like the AC unit, and he's digging through the documents. It's not really a suspenseful scene. I never am like in suspense, but it just feels like realistic, and I guess that comes from this Al Pacino's character is based off of a real person. I never
Yeah.
like realized that, but like it's an actual cop that actually kind of went into the leather scene to bust. It was a couple of crooked cops, is actually what it was. It wasn't like a gay killer. It was cops that were going in and stealing money from gay people, telling them, kind of secrets would be revealed and everything unless you pulled out all that money. Is the real life what happened?
There was though like killings though that were happening in a gay
Yeah,
bar, like in real life. Though, isn't that what they're saying?
yeah. There were killings that happened in real life, but I guess those that never got solved, and the cops never got those pinned on them. But you never know, right?
Well, that's what I was gonna suggest. So, like, I don't. I mean, was this movie like I thought? I mean, the ending of this movie is very open ended,
Yes, yeah,
and it's almost like implying like, was he the real killer, or is he just mentally unstable at this point? And
yeah.
because one thing I noticed, and I don't know if this was intentional or maybe it was just a thing at the time, but like there are so many people, Al Pacino included, that all have like the exact same hairstyle and like dress
Hmm.
the same way. Like there are so many freaking perms in this movie where it's just like everybody has like these perfectly permed hairs that are just like real curly.
Hmm.
But it just seems like they were kind of going for this type of thing, like implying that, I mean, that's what even they said in the movie. It's like they, like at the end of the movie, it's like they didn't want to have like a definitive answer for the killer. I mean, they kind of imply that, hey, maybe this guy was the killer the whole time, but it's like almost saying that maybe they didn't catch the real one, since in real life they didn't really catch a real killer.
Yeah, that is true, and it definitely sets that up. Because there is that murder that happens after he's in custody, and it's like the innocent guy, right? The one that was
Mm-hmm.
really helpful to Al Pacino wasn't really part of the S&M scene. He ends up dead, and Paul Sorvino is just like, oh, God, I can't believe that it's happened again. So I mean, yeah, nothing really gets solved in the end, which is the depressing part.
Now, do you think were they trying to imply, because there is a shot of Al Pacino at the very end of this movie? Were they trying to imply that Al Pacino might have been a killer?
I
Man,
never thought that, but you say that and it would make sense, right?
well, because at the very end of the movie,
Hmm.
so the killer in this movie has a very specific getup, and
Yes.
like that has these aviator shades, leather jacket with like this leather military type of hat,
Hmm.
and or biker hat or whatever you want to call it. But anyway, Al Pacino brought that outfit with him to his
Hmm.
girlfriend's fiance's place.
Yeah, who's played
And
by Karen Allen, I should add.
yeah, that was pre Indiana Jones. So this
Hmm.
is, it's like, well, why would he have that outfit? And it's
That's true.
and they just had that long scene at the very end. The movie ends with Al Pacino just staring at the camera, like at, so it's,
Yeah, I guess I was looking at it as like he was a broken man. Like after everything that happened, he questioned a lot about himself. But I do think you're on to something. I do think that it definitely leaves up something ambiguous. Like maybe, he was his neighbor, like that would have been an easy kill for him to get before he left or something. So,
I mean, it could be a number of things. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into it, because even William Friedkin said it was like a different meaning for the scene, but
gotcha.
it,
But
it could be. That's just in my own little head canon.
that's what's fun about like that's why I like movies that are ambiguous. It gives you a chance to kind of think like, ooh, what could happen, or some of the implications, rather than it all just laying all the facts out for you.
And I think that's one reason why I disliked the movie when I first watched it, or
Hmm.
maybe I didn't love it as much, because I was just like, what do you mean they didn't? That should be a happy ending. They got the kill, like that
Yeah,
type of
yeah.
thing. Like, but now, like when I'm thinking about it more critically, it's like, okay, it's like this movie isn't really a who done it. This is more just a man slowly becoming like losing his psyche, like being involved in this scene that he does not want to be a part in.
Exactly. It kind of loses like his grip, and maybe questions himself because like he can't even sleep with his girl anymore. And he like we see that one scene where he gets booked by the cop, and he's in like Al Pacino's in the very like open position with his hands tied behind his back and his leg up, and he's completely naked when they get him.
So I was kind of wondering, do you think he crossed that line in this movie? I mean, like,
I,
for the sake of the character.
I think so. If he was willing to be in that position, and then afterwards he was telling the cops like you came in way too early, I think so. I think he did open himself up a little bit.
Because the only reason I asked that, because there is a scene also where he's hanging out in the park
Hmm.
and he's having like kind of like this stare down with like Joe Spinell's character,
Hmm.
and and then he ends up following another like guy home, and I was like, what was that about? Like, and
Yeah.
like, because he specifically followed that guy. It wasn't like he left on his own. He was like, another guy was walking and he followed him. So,
Yeah, well, that's what I kind of like about it is like he kind of you can tell he loses a little bit of that innocence that he had at the beginning of the movie because like I really like the scene where he goes into like the store with the handkerchiefs and he's just
yeah.
asking and they're like, "Oh, the yellow one means you want a golden shower, and the left pocket it means that you'll give, and the right will mean you receive," and like all this stuff, and he's learning, and eventually he does seem like he knows what he's doing, like he's a part of the community.
The only thing that was weird about that, so they talk about the handkerchiefs.
Uh
So he's
huh.
heard about what the handkerchiefs are, and but then he still ends up buying a,
Yeah.
a yellow handkerchief. So I was like, so was he just not listening to that guy, or was he just hoping that nobody else would be interested in golden
Or
showers?
he doesn't know what a golden shower is. And he's like, yeah, no, I don't know. I like gold. We'll see what's up with that. So, and then he learned the hard way.
Yeah.
Um, but there's one scene I really have to bring up that I think is just bizarre. One of the most bizarre scenes in this movie is the interrogation scene with
Oh
the
yeah.
with the big dude just wearing a jock strap that's a detective that slaps people around. And I mean, my exact same questions. They smacks people, and both Al Pacino and the other guy he hits. They're like, "Who the hell is that? Who is that?" Never really gets answered. It's just like some guy that goes around and slaps people.
Yeah, it's a guy, a big black guy in a jock strap, and with a cowboy hat on, and slaps people as hard as they can. But like, so I did read. So they did mention that briefly on the
Yeah.
behind the scenes, and they said that was like a real thing. And I read in more about it because I was like, what is the
Okay.
deal? What that is the deal with that? So what they would do, that was to kind of make uh like murder suspects lose their credibility, to kind of shake them up a little bit. So like they would actually have that come in, and they would have like the guy slap them or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then later, like when they had questions, like, yeah, like some guy would come in like in a jock strap that and just slap me, just make it look like they're not.
The silliest thing.
Yeah, like just to make it look like it's just taking away like all credibility from them. Like, oh, okay,
That's
this guy's not.
horrible.
Or
But
just
that's really
Eric.
interesting, though.
Yeah, so I was just like, oh, okay. Um,
Gotcha.
but that made a little more sense, but still it's very out there. I mean, even still, even with the context, it doesn't make it any more reasonable. But it just adds to the movie.
Yeah, it's just one of those like things. And I do really like this movie. I know, I guess we have to say like when this movie came out, it was panned. People hated this movie. And especially I feel like it had a lot put onto it because it was about the gay community, about a gay community having murders within it, being like when you see these bar scenes, you might think that it paints a negative portrayal, um, and I can see where that's coming from for sure, especially like in the 80s when it's not like now people were more openly gay than ever before, but it still was like no, not everybody was accepting of it, not as much as today. So to put a movie out that's so strongly gay and then make it a negative murder movie, I get that being like a reason to be like, I don't like this movie.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing too is that this movie, not only was it not not accepted by the mainstream crowd, but there was also like the gay community itself kind of rejected the movie as well. And even though like William Friedkin jumped through all these hoops to try to get the movie made, and like pretty much asked like all the permission of everybody and try to get gay people involved into the making of this movie, it was still seen as like, oh, they're like, from the gay community, it was just seen like, oh, like they're just trying to exploit us, or like trying to make something that's just going to make everything, like our lives even worse. And there's like a introspective moment from William Friedkin on the behind the scenes too of the movie, where he's like, he does, spell it like, hey, it was not my intention to do, to add any more negative connotation to being gay, but I just kind of saw it as like a backdrop to being a murder mystery. He said, but he even said like, in a way, I did exploit them.
Yeah, and I mean, he admits it, but I do see the whole idea that it is a backdrop. I don't think it paints anyone it shows, it doesn't show the whole gay community as a negative or anything. In my opinion, it is just the killer ends up being gay and is killing other gay people.
No, and I don't think there's anything negative like that the movie's trying to say, but I think a lot of people from conservative backgrounds could see a movie like this and be like, hey, this must be how all gay people act, but that's not the case. This is just like an extreme case. Like and at the same time, I think that's what gay people were worried about. It's like, well, you guys are just going to make my life even worse. And I don't, but again, I don't think that was the intention behind this movie. I think a lot of it was just trying to, like, he was like, oh, this is a really unique background. Let me just put this into my murder mystery.
Yeah, exactly. But Ryan, this was nominated for Worst Picture at the Razzies, as well as Worst Director and Screenplay. So
of course, that means it's bad.
Yeah, this is in the '80s. Like, God, you'll see some like I think 1980. That's the same year that they nominated The Shining for Worst Picture, right?
Right, The Shining got nominated, and all. So I mean, I don't take their I take their ratings with a very grain of salt.
Yeah, but I will say, just to wrap it up, Cruisin', I think, is a really interesting murder mystery movie. Well, it's not even a murder mystery, cop procedural murder movie. Al Pacino gives a really interesting performance that you don't really see a lot in his career, and it is a cool setting, and I think it's a very interesting piece of '80s culture. So I say check it out.
Yeah, I mean, if you're listening to our episode and any of that stuff, you're like, I don't want to see that. Then you already. I mean, I think you should know. I think you already know already. This is the type of movie you want to see. But if you're going in with an open mind and you want to see a great mystery, good movie, I definitely say check this one out. This movie is definitely a recommend for me.
Cool. Well, I think that wraps it up. But Ryan, what are we going to be covering on Thursday?
Well, Nathan, what's the worst kind of prey?
One that's on Hulu?
No, Nathan. Obviously, the worst kind is Deadly Prey.
Oh, yeah, I do think so.
That's what everyone says.
Yeah, that's just so common.
But no, we are going to be talking about the movie Deadly Prey, which is streaming for free right now on Tubi.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited for that. If you want to email us, you can email us at driveanddoubleFeaturePodcast@gmail.com. You can also post us over at X at DIDFpod. But until next time.
Until next time.